I said there's three things that happen that are underneath the external anger. The first one is unmet needs, hurt. The second is frustration. Yes, anger is a secondary emotion. Yes, it takes courage to look below the surface. Yes, we're all anger and have lots of emotions under there. But the second one is frustration. And here's what I mean by frustration. Frustration is real or perceived unmet expectations. Notice what it says in 2 Kings chapter 5, 11 through 12. The story's about Naaman. In the context, if you're like some of us that didn't grow up reading the Bible, it's a story of this king from another land who has leprosy, and someone says, hey, there's a prophet in Israel. Miracles are happening there. You should go talk to him. And so he goes and talks to this great prophet, Elijah, and he has some expectations about how he thinks the prophet is going to heal him. And so we pick up the story, 2 Kings 5, verse 11. But Naaman became furious and went away and said, indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. Because what the prophet did was he didn't even come out. He sends his servant out to this very important person and says, go wash in the Jordan and dip 7 times, your leprosy's gone. The guy goes, what? I don't even get a hearing? I mean, there's better rivers where I came from than the Jordan. Are you kidding me? So his expectations are he's going to wave his hand, have this big moment, and it doesn't happen. And so notice what happens here. He talks about there's better rivers where I came from. And then he goes, could I not wash in them and be healed? So he turned and went away in rage. Fortunately, he had a servant that said, hey, boss, might be worth a try. I mean, if he would have told you to do something really hard, you would have done it. Why don't you just go ahead and do what he said? And of course, he does, and he's healed. But notice, when we expect something, and our experience is here, if it's a small distance, we call it frustration. If it's a big distance, we call it anger. And it's true of all of us. Notice that second passage in a personal relationship here, 1 Chronicles 15. David is coming back and he's bringing the ark into the city. And David is a wild, open worshiper. He's an extrovert and he's so excited. And he's coming in and there's the ark and there's music and he's twirling and he's dancing and he's giving glory to God. And his wife is up in the window and she's seeing the king, her husband, walking in, dancing like that. The text in 1 Chronicles 15 says, and it happened as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came to the city of David, that Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David whirling and playing music, and she despised him in her heart. Why? She had an expectation of, this is how kings, especially my husband, should act. I'm embarrassed. And not only I'm embarrassed, but he's sort of violated my unspoken expectations that here's decorum and here's how you need to act. And this is how it makes me look. And the result, she despises him. Let me give you a tool when you're frustrated. This is called the I desire versus the I demand tool, if you will, okay? What I want you to know is this. When it comes to unmet expectations, if words like ought, should, always, never are a part of your vocabulary, you've slipped from, I desire things to happen, to you're demanding them. I ought to have a great marriage. My kids ought to turn out right. You should act like that. You ought to work harder. You never say anything nice to me. You're always late. You never encourage me. You're always more into work. You ought to be kinder to our children. You should come home earlier. Ought, should, always, never. Ought, should, always, never. Those are demand statements. 2 things are true. Number 1 is that does not work with people. Anytime you say ought, should, never, always to another human being, first of all, it's not true. No one never does anything or always does something. And when you're speaking ought or should, that's what authority figures, moms and dads, say to kids. And when you say it to your kids, maybe you need to make a demand here and there. But when we do that in our relationships with one another or with God, I meet people all the time who are completely disillusioned with God. I prayed, I came to church regularly, I gave my money, I even went on a missions trip, and my kid got cancer. In other words, there's this expectation that if you do certain things, God is obligated and you demand. You know what? We went to premarital counseling. We did the whole marriage thing the way we were supposed to. We didn't even have sex before we got married. 2 years later, she walks out on me. In other words, listen to the difference. I desire to have kids that really turn out well. I wish that the economy would get better and things will go better in my job. I desire to have a great marriage. I long to and wish to be married someday. See, a desire or a wish is a request. And when you have a desire that you don't get, you get disappointed. When you have a demand, you get angry. Naaman was ticked off and almost missed God's will and God's blessing because he had preconceived in his mind, this is how God has to show up. And if he doesn't show up like that, well, now are you ready for this? You grew up in a family, and I grew up in a family, and you grew up in a part of the country, and I grew up in a part of the country, and especially around here, you come from a culture, and there's people in this room and in this church, of course, where we live, from multicultures. Do you realize we have different expectations? Very different expectations about what ought to be. When I married my wife, she had a father who was very handy. Repaired the car, filled it up with gas. She married me. She had expectations. She was very angry at times because this is what a man is supposed to do. I had a mother, though she worked full time as a teacher and a guidance counselor, that she got up every day at 5 o'clock. We had bacon and eggs and pancakes and the whole deal every single morning. I thought that's just how it always worked. The bowl with the cereal and the milk out on the table when I got married was a little bit different. She didn't grow up where they even ate breakfast together. Those are funny little illustrations, but I want to ask you to think about what kind of expectations do you have of important relationships in your home, important relationships at work, cultural relationships. What are things that unconsciously even you demand, and you're mad at God? Or how about this, some of you? Your expectations that you'll never mess up. You'll turn the report in on time, every time. That you are someone that always comes through for everyone all the time. You'll always be neat. You'll always be clean. Your kids have to get into a great school. And you're a perfectionist. And you beat yourself up and you're down on yourself, or you're a crazy workaholic because you have warped expectations. I'm going to go out on a limb and think everyone here is probably human. Just a thought. I mean, intellectually, do humans ever make a mistake? Yes or no? Okay. Are you human? Do humans ever really blow it and say something they wish they hadn't? Do humans, even Christians that love God, ever lie? Sort of steal? I mean, we'd never call it that, but ever watch things that we wish we hadn't? Ever do things that make us feel sad? I have a list of cards. I'm a very goal-oriented person. And when I was 28, I started writing out goals for my marriage, goals for ministry, goals for my kids. And my goal was and I would write all these things down. And it was about a year and a half. And I remember making a shift. I read a verse that changed my life. Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. And I went through all my goals and I put an X through them. I desire to have a marriage that would honor God. I long to model righteousness and holiness and love before my children in a way that they would catch it from their Heavenly Father. I desire, if you would allow, to put something in print someday that would bless and encourage other believers. I desire, I changed all of them because I realized a goal is something I can accomplish. And a goal put me under this. I was already a workaholic. Man, this was like gasoline on the flames. So let me ask you then, what about your expectations? Notice a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The third, underneath the iceberg surface is insecurity, real or perceived attack on my personal worth. When I'm angry, sometimes it's an unmet need. I feel hurt. When I'm angry, sometimes it's an unmet expectation of myself, of God, or of others. And I need to do a personal inventory and ask myself, instead of making demands, I need to begin to communicate desires, even for myself, with God and with others. The third reason that we bolt to anger is insecurity. That's when there's an attack on our worth. Anger is often the evidence of inner insecurity in my life. I read the verse, Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Have you ever had someone either loudly or criticize you or read a tweet about you or someone post on social media or someone come in and say, boy, that was a lousy job, and they poke you, or someone cut in front of you and then give you that famous gesture? And immediately you're ready to hit the gas or post back on social media or email them this blistering email, right? What happened? See, a harsh word stirs up anger. Why? Because we feel threatened, because we feel attacked. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Notice Proverbs 18:19, an offended brother is more unyielding than a fortified city, and disputes are like the barred gates of the citadel. You know, when out of anger, when you attack someone or they feel like you're attacking them, the walls go up, don't they? Some of you have some relatives or have some former friends or some people that you used to go to church with, or maybe even some family members, that someone got offended, someone got attacked, and out of their insecurities, they just put up walls. Don't we all have some of those friends that we used to hang out with and we felt close to, and life went kind of pretty good? And maybe some distance, or maybe a little change in job, or maybe a mild geography. And sort of the sign of people that are pretty close is if you call them or text them, you usually hear back, the same day or the next day, right? Sort of the unwritten rule of really close friends. And now you text them or you email them and it's like 4 days or 5 days. And you're thinking, well, don't they like me anymore? Well, I know they're really busy or this or that. And then if you're passive aggressive, then when they email you back, you think, I think I'll wait about 4 or 5 days. And little resentment. But how many of us would ever sit down with someone and say, hey, let's grab coffee. We haven't seen each other for a while. Or you catch you on the phone and how's everything going? And, this may sound silly. What's that? We used to hang out so much, and I know we have different jobs and our worlds are going a little bit different, but I actually feel kind of rejected when I text or call you. Man, I don't get anything back for 3 or 4 days. Because as crazy as that sounds, even as I'm talking, people are coming to your mind that you realize there's some resentment that grows. And if you're a stuffer, it goes down inside your heart. And if you're a leaker, you'll joke, hey, did you get that email? Or, oh, I know, your life's really busy now. You probably don't answer people for a month or 2. And really what you don't want to do, I want to get it out here, but if they say something, well, I'm just joking, But you hope they get the message. And if you're a spewer, you'll sit on it for quite a while, and then you'll say something really stupid that might separate you as good friends when there's maybe a lot of good reasons of why that is happening. Let me give you a couple biblical examples of what happens when our insecurity is sort of poked. 1 Samuel chapter 18, it's the story of Saul and David has killed Goliath, and now David's getting famous, and Saul is the king, and he's appointed him over his troops. And so David went out wherever Saul sent him, and he behaved wisely, and Saul sent him out over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people and in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it happened as they were coming home, when David was returning from slaughtering of the Philistines, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines and with joy and with musical instruments. And so the women sang as they danced. Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they've ascribed to David 10,000s and to me only 1,000. Now what more can he have except the kingdom? He's just threatened. I mean, instead of going, you know what, I must be a really good delegator. You know what, I got an eye for talent. I found that guy, and wow, look at how the blessing of God is here in Israel because I was able to support that guy and launch him. But no. We're all desperately insecure. That was one of the probably biggest lessons I ever learned. In the very first pastorate, it was out in a little rural community, but it was a group of people that wanted to have a church where they lived because they wanted their kids out of all the hustle and bustle of Dallas. But once I got to be the pastor, there's only 35 people, but this guy owned an insurance company, and this guy dealerships, and this guy owned that, and this guy owned that. And they were all very wealthy and very powerful people. It was really, really intimidating. You know, we're going to be gone because everyone's going skiing in Vail, or we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that. And I remember feeling really, really intimidated. And I read a book by a Swiss Christian psychologist. It was translated from French to English, called The Strong and the Weak, Paul Tournier. And the book is very simple. He takes all of his patients, and he said, everyone is desperately insecure, rooted right from the fall. You know, from the day that the garden where sin entered, God said, where are you? And Adam, for the first time, became self-conscious and realized there was inadequacies, and so he hid because of his shame. And we have all been hiding because of our shame. Down deep in your heart, down deep in my heart, we honestly feel that if someone really saw, psychologically, emotionally, saw who we really are, they would reject us. And so we pose. And some people pose to keep a distance by strong reactions. They power up. They have this many people reporting to you. This is where I go. This is what I do. Here's where we vacation. And you just think, I don't want to be around that person. But some people, in their insecurity, have weak reactions, and they withdraw. And they're not just shy, they're super shy. And they avoid risk. And sometimes they look at their feet a lot. Or if they begin to open up, they tell you about all their problems, and they're a victim, and you listen the first time, and then the second time, then the 8th time, and then you see them in the hallway of church, and they're coming this way, and you think, I'm going to take the other hallway. Because I've heard this, it's like a record. You push the button, because every one of us, but you know how freeing it is? There's not a person in this room, there's not a person watching this, there's not a person on this planet that isn't desperately insecure, that doesn't have fears that we're going to be revealed. And when you're attacked, when your worth, your value, it can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be psychological. When you're attacked, you respond in anger. Notice in Acts chapter 5, these are the religious leaders. The resurrection has happened. The church is flourishing. And notice Acts chapter 5, verse 12. And through the hands of the apostles, many signs and wonders were done among the people. And they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch. And none dared join them because the people were highly esteemed. And the believers were increasing, and the Lord added multitudes to them, men and women, so that they brought the sick out into the streets and laid them on beds and couches. At least the shadow of Peter would pass by and fall on some of them. Also, the multitudes gathered from the surrounding cities to Jerusalem, bringing the sick people and those who were tormented by unclean spirits, and they were all healed. God is launching this movement, and miracles are happening. So if you're a Jew and, you've been the Messiah and you're a Sadducee or a Pharisee, you're thinking you've been praying for a movement of God. So how would you respond when God does this? What's the text? Look at it. Then the high priest rose up, and all who were with him, which is the sect of the Sadducees, and they were filled with indignation. And they laid their hands on the apostles, and they put them in the common prison. What's the deal? They're threatened. I was having coffee with a buddy this morning. We were talking about some of this, and I don't know, it was a year or two ago. We were playing golf, and we're in the cart, and for those golfers, they're supposed to wait till you get out of the way, and someone hit into us. It bounced once and bounced off of our cart. And he's a big guy, and he had that look like, excuse me, I think I'm going to take these guys out. You just don't do that. And we sat there for just a second, and yeah, it's that anger, personal attack. It's like when someone gives you the finger. It's like when someone posts on Facebook. Well, here's what you do. And we talked about this because as we've both been learning to do this, it's been great. You pause and you say, now, who did that? Do I really care what they think? Is it worth getting mad and getting in an argument or pushing or shoving or running after that person who cut me off? In other words, wait a second. In fact, look at the questions I gave you. Here's the tool. Ask yourself, why am I feeling threatened? You're bolting to anger. What's being attacked? The guy made a mistake. He hit into us. The ball didn't hit us. Who's attacking me? Some guy I don't know. Do I really want to have an argument with some guy I don't know? Do I really want to zoom through the freeway? And when you catch up with him, what are you going to do? Especially if he has a gun. Is the threat menial or meaningful? In other words, is this just a little thing or is this a big threat? Yes. God made me fight or flight. Man, I think my family's in danger. You better be angry. You better be ready. Hey, personal attack, sometimes you... And then finally, whose approval am I seeking anyway? I had an experience here recently. There's a church in the Chicago area that the pastor and I were friends many years ago, and he's gone through some really, really painful things, made some really apparently bad decisions, and we haven't talked in many, many years. And just everything was on the news and just horrendous. And he was excused from his church, and there's just all kind of social media stuff surrounding it. But it was Easter. And my son, when he was in Chicago, went to that church. My daughter, when she was in Chicago, she went to that church. I've got friends at that church. My other son helped them with their worship. And they said, hey, is there any way, we're in a jam. A few thousand people have left. Finances are a mess. But the church is hurting. Could you come and preach for Easter? And I thought, well, that congregation, well, of course. It's the first Easter I was free in about 35 years, Sure. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting all this stuff on Twitter. I thought Ingram was an honorable person, but he must be. And all these people saying stuff that don't know me. And everything in me wanted to go, wait a second, how in limited characters can I straighten everybody out? I felt all this anger inside. Has this happened to anybody else? And then you just realize, wait a second. Has anything ever been resolved like that? Will entering this fray honor God? If I say something, am I expecting to get no response? Or am I expecting to go, oh, thanks? Those few little words you said on Twitter explains it all. You know what was being attacked? My character, my reputation, and I'm insecure. And I wanted to straighten everybody out. But whose approval do you need? You've got Christ.